Welcome to Tech It Up with Jessica Lee. I have the Senior Director of Customer Success from Mitel, Chris Fortuna. How are you, Chris?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, love to have you here to learn more about what's going on with Mitel, because Mitel has been around 40 years, but it has some acquisitions like ShoreTel, and now it's got the cloud offering. So there's a lot of exciting things. Wanted to get your take on what's going on.
Sure. Yeah, as you said, Mitel's been around over 40 years, just highly regarded as best-in-class unified communications.
Okay.
And with this shift now to unified communications as a service, certainly Mitel was playing there. You mentioned the acquisition of ShoreTel, and that really shored up their strength and their position in unified communications as a service. And that's where I live and breathe.
That's right.
Customer success is such a key, critical component of the subscription model.
Yes.
And so we've made some heavy investments in this area.
Okay. With the shift to the cloud, you probably are seeing different expectations from the customers. How do you address and make sure they have this excellent customer experience?
Yeah. It's we'll find out in the onboarding discovery process where they're coming from. So traditionally, customers have a lot of premise equipment. They've got a partner that's been helping them out with, managing the hardware, updating the software, a lot of these things that they're not going to have to do anymore. But again, depending on where they've come from, that will determine what their expectations are. So we understand that during the onboarding discovery, and ultimately we want to make sure that we meet every customer expectation along the way to make that as seamless as a transition as possible.
Right. And what metrics or what KPIs do you look at to make sure you're doing a good job? Sure.
From a financial standpoint, obviously there's a quote to cash or book to bill that you're looking at for that onboarding phase. But ultimately, for me, being on the receiving end of that, we do an NPS survey at the end of the onboarding cycle, so that we know, what's the temperature of this customer, and we get real-time feedback so that internally we can address any issues that are uncovered, and then externally, obviously, it gives us an opportunity to better prepare the customer for the next stage in the life cycle.
Right. So you've got this adoption of technology is one thing. You've got the retention, expansion, maybe them being a reference.
Sure. Yeah. No, in customer success. So once the customer is fully onboarded and handed off to success, you talk about the 4 key areas of focus for us being adoption, expansion, retention, and advocacy is absolutely a key component of that. So can we build a network of referenceable customers? And we do, later in the life cycle, we do another NPS survey that kind of helps us gauge that. Where are they at? Are they referenceable? Are there challenges? Are there issues here? But beyond just the NPS, we like to use a lot of data. There's a tremendous amount of data, and obviously the challenge is, collating and really identifying actionable data.
Yes.
What do you want to do something about? Right. We don't need to wait for a survey to tell us that a customer might be at adoption risk. You've got a customer that's paying for a whole set of capabilities that they're not using. We need to get ahead of that. We need to be in front of them. We need to be talking to the customers and understand, was this just a misalignment of your requirements, or are we having some challenges getting users to use the feature, or do you bottleneck at your administration being able to roll these things out to the end users? So a tremendous amount of data that we use, all orchestrated and instrumented nicely. A little plug for Gainsight is the tool that we use to help us manage that customer base.
Okay. So there's certainly the telemetry that you can use. And
Yeah.
do you share that with the partners so that maybe the partners can also take on some of that customer success responsibility?
We certainly do. We're trying. Actually, it's an interesting. At Pulse last year, there were a whole day of activity around how do you bring the VARs and the agents that are interested into the practice of customer success. They've got just as vested interest as you do. And then sometimes they've got a better reach and proximity to the customer. So we're looking at ways that we can get all of the data that we have available to them so that they can assist us with those 4 key areas that I talked about.
Right. I think there's a lot of automation now in order to drive efficiency and keep costs down while you're scaling and expanding. Because, I think you have 80 customer success managers in your team, right? So how much of the automation have you done?
We have done quite a bit. We have a broad spectrum of customers as well. So the automation has to be a right fit for the segment. And in a lot of cases, for the customer that only has 10 or 15 endpoints, their needs and how we would want to direct automation to guide them and assist them in their success is going to be much different than somebody that's got 4,000 endpoints that's managing this vast enterprise. So absolutely using that data, looking at signals, generating calls to action for the customer success manager when it's warranted, but also triggering outreaches both to the customer, to the customer success manager, and eventually, as you mentioned, to be able to bring our partners into that ecosystem as well.
Do you have different programs for the enterprise versus the SMB, like smaller accounts? The
interesting thing with Mitel is regardless of whether you've got 10 endpoints or 10,000 endpoints, you get a dedicated customer success manager. The functions and the amount of time and attention that they might be able to spend on each account are going to vary where you are in that spectrum. But we're very proud of the fact that we have a dedicated customer success manager for every account.
That's good.
Yeah.
What challenges do you face?
Oh, well, none. Everything works perfectly. No, obviously, we have... you talked about automation, and automation is triggered by data, and the data is so abundant. So sorting through that to really identify what is actionable, what is something that you really want to do something about, and then you find 25 things that, hey, these are important enough that we want to do something about. How do we prioritize them? And then how do you prioritize them against the segments so that you're not overwhelming the customer success manager with things that just become noise in the system? So really bubbling that up. And one of the things that we did to aid us with this was a pretty vast data science project where we took volumes and volumes of data of our past accounts, customers that had exited Mitel. And we looked at every single dimension to establish corollaries for churn, and then build a model around that for our existing customer base. And so, but again, you talked about challenges. Even with that, we found, great, there's a whole bunch of corollaries. Some are stronger than others. So how do you really bubble up and prioritize the ones that are the highest corollary? And, data is not perfect. So you have to test things. It's a trial and error that's involved. So you've got to launch a program, monitor it, measure it. If it's working, great. If it's not, tweak it, refine it. If your assumptions turn out to be wrong, you just got to throw it out and move on to the next one.
Right. It's true. There's just so much data, But you can get a lot of insights, and then you have to prioritize what to do with certain insights, like take action.
So much data that it could be paralyzing, it could be crippling. But with the team that we've built, and with my peers, we've just got this move forward attitude, and let's try stuff.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work, that's fine. You can fail and you can fall down, just fall forward and learn from what you did.
Yeah.
Go on to the next thing.
I think one of the areas I find people have challenges a lot is to do with the migration. Technology is changing so fast. And so, how do you help customer through that transition of migrating to or upgrading?
Sure. The beauty of Connect, and really the promise of software as a service and cloud delivery, is that you really don't need, as a customer, you don't have to manage that, and you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to plan, a weekend where you're going to go and upgrade your PBX. You just walk in Monday morning, or maybe Wednesday morning, or maybe Friday afternoon, new features show up, and they're unintrusive. They're not disruptive to the end user. They're, ideally going to be intuitive, easy to use, and self-explanatory. That's really the promise of the technology. So going with UCaaS, you really are effectively taking upgrading and change management out of your the realm of IT. You don't need to do that anymore. Okay. You talked about migration, so there's a variety of migration. So Mitel has a huge premise install base. We'd love to get all of those folks migrated over to UCaaS solution, Connect. But that is a challenge, and much like the onboarding conversation, we just have to treat it. We have to understand where they're coming from in order to deliver the best seamless experience for them to get to the new thing.
I think one of the ways that I've seen companies like VMware, they have a decision-making tree where people who are looking to migrate can go in and put in answers to some of these questions about their migration. And it comes out with a lot of product knowledge information to help them through the migration planning, what they need to do, what they need to read, and how long it would take. So I think self-serve content can also help address some of these educational gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. We have similar, sort of that decision tree, and internally we use that as a tool. So the project managers that are dealing with the onboarding they have these tools to guide them and make this the most efficient process as possible. And what we've been doing and investing in heavily, just with a safe water or safe harbor statement around any roadmap stuff. What you will see in our onboarding experience is exactly just that, where a customer can go in and, if it's not a terribly complex deployment, they could have dial tone and a phone number and a soft phone and an auto attendant within 15 minutes, and it will be up and running and live and active. But to build those tools that you talked about, put those in a customer-facing portal where
it public.
It's exactly where it's really intuitive and easy to get through that onboarding process.
But I think it should help with customer support, customer success, in that the more content you can offer and guide them to get the content, then they will find the information without having to put in a ticket for service or having to deal with, customer success time.
We've I have a extensive background in support as well, and knowledge management. We would study this stuff, and you build portals, and you build knowledge bases, and you build tools, and you create content. And then you get people in a room, and one of the first things they always do is go to Google to search it if they can't figure it out. That's the key, if they can't figure it out. So the best thing that you can do is just make it intuitive. In the UI of the customer that's sitting there in front of them, just make it self-explanatory, whether that's, and telecommunications is complex. So, whether it's tooltips, whether it's hoverovers, whether it's a guided navigation through the setup, that's the goal. That's really the end game.
Yes. I think people are trying to put in even like artificial intelligence to have that virtual assistant be more and more intelligent and be able to provide the content that prospect is searching. Yeah,
absolutely.
Chris, what is exciting ahead for you then?
Well, for me personally, the great thing is, I wake up every day and I have a job that I love to do. A lot of challenges for sure, but I've got a great team that I work with. I've got great partnerships from an organizational standpoint. I'm basically working for the chief customer officer. So my boss owns the customer lifecycle end to end. So the peers that I work with are those very people that are running onboarding, that are running support, the billing function, the shipping of hardware where hardware is involved. So I am just super excited to be in a position right now to drive radical improvement in the customer experience. This is the goal of Mitel. We want to make sure that we meet every single customer commitment and exceed every single customer expectation. And so I'm just very charged up about where we are in the market and where I am personally at Mitel.
Excellent. So I know the UCaaS market is huge.
Sure.
There's a lot of players, but everyone is winning because the market is huge.
Sure. Sure, the market's huge. But ultimately, it's going to come down to the user experience. And so whoever can do that the best and make sure that their customers are capturing value and delivering on their outcomes as quickly as possible will be the winner here.
Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure to talk with you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the industry.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great time.
There you have it, folks. Take it up with Jessica Lee, Chris Fortuna from Mitel.